One day, a farmer hitched up his old horse, Sam, to the wagon, and then got up in the wagon and started to jiggle the reins and said, "Giddy up, Sam. Giddy up, Mary. Giddy up, Sarah." A man standing nearby looked at the farmer and said, "Why are you doing that? Why are you calling out all those different names when all you have is old Sam hooked up to the wagon by himself?" The farmer said, "Shh. If Sam knew he was the only one hitched up to this wagon, he'd never budge an inch." At times, though, that's how we feel. At times, we feel like we are the only ones pulling the wagon. At times, we feel that when there's some trouble that needs to be resolved, when there's some problem that needs to be fixed, that it's up to us and to us alone. That's what those disciples must have been thinking. Here in this story that we listen to today from the Gospel of Luke, after Peter and James and John had come down from that mountaintop with Jesus, where Jesus had been mysteriously and wondrously transfigured or changed in appearance as they looked on, this father came up to the disciples and asked them to help his son. The father said that his son had a demon, a terrible demon that was mauling his son and injuring him by casting him down onto the ground. A terrible demon that was seeking to ruin and destroy his son's life. But for some reason, the disciples were not able to help. But when Jesus heard what was going on, in exasperation, he yelled, "You faithless and perverse generation, how much longer must I be with you and put up with you? Bring the child to me." In essence, Jesus was saying, yes, there are demons in this world that seek to destroy and ruin people's lives. But if you think that you are in that battle alone, if you think that you can take on and defeat those demons by yourself, you're wrong. You're very, very wrong. Bring those people to me. I'm here. And I am the one who is able to give those people the hope and the help that they're looking for. Just like in that story in Luke, there are many young people in our world who are tormented by demons each and every day. Demons that are seeking to destroy and ruin their lives. If you don't think so, consider this. Suicide is now the third leading cause of death among teenagers. And experts say that for every one teenager that succeeds in killing himself, there are at least another 50 who try to kill themselves but fail. Or another demon that's on the rise is what is known as cutting or self-injury. Cutting is where a teenager takes something sharp like a knife or some scissors and keeps nicking at their arms or their legs until they start to bleed. And experts say that somewhere around 1 out of every 8 teenagers gets involved with cutting at some point. Apparently doing that as a way of acting out the pain and hurt that's there in their lives. Or another demon that haunts far too many young people is the demon of violence. When asked what their biggest fear is, when teenagers across the country are asked that question, Their number one response is violence at school. And it's true. Even here in the Carleton School District, which is made up of fairly typical families, there are fights that break out at the junior, senior high school virtually every week, sometimes virtually every day. And the police get called to Carnegie Elementary School with such frequency that the school recently qualified for federal grant money to try and deal with that problem. And those, of course, are just some of the demons that are out there tormenting the youth in our society and their families. But when we feel like throwing up our hands and saying, well, what can we do? We can't solve problems like those. Those problems are just too big for us. Jesus looks at us and says, bring them to me. But why is it so often the case that we don't do that? Why is it so often the case that we don't take ourselves and others, along with the problems and the demons that we're dealing with, and go from where we are to where Jesus is? Why is it so often the case that we seem to get lost along the way? In the wintertime, out on the Great Plains around Nebraska and North and South Dakota, whenever farmers knew that a blizzard was on its way in, they would take a piece of rope and tie one end of the rope to the back door of their house, and the other end of the rope they would tie to the barn door. That way, they figured that if they went out to milk their cows, no matter how severe the storm might become, if they held on to that rope, they knew that they'd be able to get back home safely. They did that because they all knew of farmers who had died during blizzards, sometimes perishing in their own backyards. Apparently, in some cases, as farmers left their barns and tried to head back to their houses, the blizzards were so severe that the farmers lost sight of where they were headed and ended up dying, sometimes just a few yards outside of their homes. Those blizzards come into our lives not only in the form of severe winter storms like we have been experiencing in the past week or so, but those blizzards also come into our lives and in the lives of other people in the form of demons who in different ways try to destroy and ruin people's lives. And as this story in Luke shows us, the only way to face up to those demons and to defeat them is by keeping ourselves focused on Jesus and not let him go. I've heard it said that if you've never come face to face with a demon, it might be